You got it right. You got it right.
You got that right.
Oh.
But a link
Hey,
to the party.
You want to go in and maybe mute?
Yes, I'm doing that right now.
And Pat, just know we still see a box in the middle of the screen.
Did that take care of it?
It did.
Okay. And the screen first opening slide is looking fine.
It is.
Okay. I'm going on mute now.
Okay.
Been sitting out all night. That's all it's left.
Just put my spice on.
Your camera off.
They keep moving the mouse around. I don't know. What kind of page you got? Well, they need to get this show on the road. Well, it might not be much of a show. I can work a train. They just keep moving the mouse around.
Yeah, you're here on the planet. Last time it took about 12 minutes.
I was trying to get this in before I went to the phone.
They're coming for you anyway. Yeah, it's pretty rough. I was saying that.
There you go, something's happening. Okay, let's see what's happening.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If
Good
you wouldn't
morning.
mind, hi, if you wouldn't mind putting yourselves on mute, we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. It is a beautiful day. I hope that your weather is good there. I recognize you can't answer me because you're all on mute, but. All right. So Beth, everything is teed up for you.
This, we're not hearing you.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes,
Perfect. All right. And Pat, I see a box. There we go. Awesome. All right. So welcome, everybody. We are excited to be here with you this morning. Welcome to the Employer Virtual Training Series. This is webinar number 2. And we're just thrilled that we've received the kind of response we have. That just affirms for us that we are headed in the right direction, and we are selecting topics that are of interest to you. So thank you. We know you have a choice as to how you spend your day, and we really appreciate you taking time to join us today. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Beth Butler Fatal, and I am Executive Director of Disability in North Carolina. And I have the pleasure of working with Pat Kuehl, our Operations Director. And Pat, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yes, it's an honor to be here today, and I hope that you're able to gain some new information and confirm possibly some other information that you may already have.
Great. And Barton Cutter, our Communications Specialist. Barton?
hi, welcome. It's an honor to be here. I know that, I will, so, as we begin today, I know I might be hard to understand. If you miss some, I said, please feel free to interrupt or chat and have me repeat myself.
Great, thank you, Barton. And so, yeah, Barton always shares that in that he recognizes that at times it may be hard to understand him. And so please don't hesitate to ask him to repeat himself. You can use the chat box to do that as well. A couple of things as well. We do have encourage you to use the chat box to engage with each other in conversation during today's presentation. Also want you to use that to send questions our way. We will have a Q&A session following today's presentation. So that would be great if you have questions to drop those in the chat box. And finally, we want to let you know that the link that you used in order to join today's meeting will be the same link you will use to join the meetings next week and the week after. So hold on to that Zoom link. It will be the same one for the remaining of this series. And so with that, I want to get started on our presentation today. So for those that are not familiar with Disability in North Carolina, we are a nonprofit serving the state of North Carolina. We are the only business-to-business network devoted to disability employment and inclusion in the workforce, the supply chain, and in the marketplace. We were founded in 2022, or 2012, I'm sorry. So we're excited to be celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. And we will do that during our fall conference in October. So more information on that is to come. But Disability in North Carolina is also one of 24 affiliates of Disability In, which is really the leading nonprofit resource for business disability inclusion worldwide. And we're excited about that because that connects us immediately to over 400 corporations across the United States and even globally that are all committed to creating employment opportunities for people with disabilities. We are really that collective voice. That's our mission is really to empower businesses across our state to achieve disability inclusion and equality for all. Next slide. And so today's topic is on addressing legal questions around recruiting and hiring individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our team of self-advocates with intellectual and developmental disabilities that have played a key role in informing this work, in creating these webinars that we're bringing to you. They have been a tremendous help. And you'll see one of our self-advocates during today's presentation. You'll hear directly from her, and we will have some joining us, hopefully through at the end with the live Q&A session that we'll host as well. Again, a huge thanks to the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities who have funded this work. So we couldn't do this without the help of the DD Council. Next slide.
So this is Pat Kuehl, and I just want to issue a little reminder here. Last week, we talked about the prevalence of intellectual and developmental disabilities, and I want to remind you that 2.5 million Americans are individuals who are identified as having an intellectual and developmental disability. The majority of them are either underemployed or unemployed, and that is in spite of the fact that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the ability, the desire, and the willingness to work competitively. It's largely due to the fact that there continue to be myths around the willingness and the interest of individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities to work. So this is a persistent misconception. It's unfortunate because it hinders many qualified applicants from becoming employed. The truth is that most people with intellectual and developmental disabilities can perform in a competitive position if they receive the necessary training, which is true of all of us. We all need training to be successful in our jobs. And furthermore, there is ample research, many studies going back 30 plus years that show the compelling benefits to businesses for including individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the workplace, as well as their ability to perform in that workplace. So Beth?
Thank you, Pat. So let's talk a bit about who our job seekers with disabilities are. The Americans with Disabilities Act defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. You can be regarded as having a disability and or have a record of such an impairment. Understanding that some individuals with disabilities may not have active symptoms. I think about an individual perhaps that has a history of cancer, but they're in full remission now. So they may not need an accommodation at this time, at the point that even maybe they're hired. But because they have had that diagnosis in the past, it's possible that they could have a need in the future, which is why this work and this conversation that we're having today is so important. Again, the ADA makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person based on the fact that they have a disability. Next slide. So what does the ADA cover? Clearly, we just celebrated the 32nd anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act in July. It truly is one of America's most comprehensive pieces of civil rights legislation. It is a piece of work that we clearly, disability has its own history, has its own story. And so I encourage you to take time to learn about that history as well. I think it's an important part of the work that we're doing together. The ADA really prohibits discrimination and really levels the playing field for people with disabilities and creates opportunities for employment and equal access to purchasing goods and services and just fully participating, whether that's in the state and local governments, programs and services that are offered. But again, just really fully engaging individuals with disabilities in the American life. Next slide. So there are several titles under the ADA. The one that we will focus most on during today's presentation is, of course, Title I, probably the one you hear most often about, particularly in the work that you may be in. But Title I makes it unlawful for individuals with disabilities to be discriminated against. Qualified people with disabilities, again, the definition that I shared with you. A person has to be a qualified individual with a disability to be covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. There are several other titles listed here. I encourage you, if you're not familiar with the ADA, to take some time and read through it. It truly does help to broaden your perspective and your understanding about the importance of accessibility and inclusion for all. Next slide.
So here are some popular myths and facts. Let's talk about what the facts are. The fact is that any applicant that is unqualified is not protected under the ADA. So, if the applicant is unqualified, you do not have to hire them, even if they have a disability. The ADA does not provide any higher preferences for applicants under the ADA. And if you are a small business with less than with less than 15 employees, the ADA doesn't necessarily apply to you. However, everything that is covered in Title I of the ADA is still good business practice. It's also the fact that most ADA disputes are resolved by external mediation or negotiation. And of course, any inappropriate behavior by an employee is not protected by the ADA. So it's really a protection for income job. Back to you,
Thanks, Barton. So Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits the private employers, state and local governments, right, employment agencies and labor unions from discriminating against, again, qualified individuals with disabilities throughout the process of employment. So the job application procedures, hiring practices, termination, advancement, promotional opportunities. That's important to understand as well, is that often when we think about hiring individuals with disabilities, our first thought is that entry-level position. Understand that employers need to make all of their processes accessible to individuals with disabilities, including those training and development opportunities and promotional opportunities as well. So when we think about that, we really want to open up that entire employment opportunity, that entire employment experience, a career path for all individuals, including, again, those with disabilities, and particularly those with intellectual and developmental disabilities as well. The ADA covers employers, again, with 15 or more employees. So just as Barton clarified a minute ago, those employers that have less than 15 employees, the ADA may not apply to you. That said, if you want talent, and according to all the signs that are up that say now hiring, this is a talent pool that you need to be paying attention to. So at this time, Pat, I want to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Beth. So it's important to understand that disclosing the presence of a disability is a personal choice. And there are benefits and risks when individuals make those choices, as well as benefits and risks for the employer. So one of the primary benefits is that if an accommodation is needed when an individual discloses, the ADA provides a mechanism for delivering those accommodations. Another benefit to businesses is that if you happen to be a federal contractor or you are a vendor of a federal contractor, there is an aspirational goal of 7% of the workforce being individuals with disabilities. And big companies are tracking this very diligently to see if they are hitting these aspirational goals. Then the final thing is that disclosure can create the building of trust and strengthening the relationship between the employer and the employee if performance issues require that the individual take a look and need an ADA accommodation in order to meet all the demands of the job now or into the future. So some of the risks that are associated with disclosure are that, let's face it, folks, discrimination against people with disabilities is a common experience. And even enlightened company policies may not prevent the unconscious bias that can reside in all of us, myself included. And last week we learned that attitudinal barriers are actually the most prevalent barrier to identifying and leveraging the talent of people with disabilities, let alone the talent of people with IDD. So when we own that fact that we all have unconscious bias and the potential for attitudinal barriers, it's an important thing to understand as you enter into that conversation about disclosure with an individual that is in your employment. And then the next thing I want to unpack just a little bit, but we'll go deeper in a few slides forward, is the notion of the essential functions that the ADA refers to. Individuals must be able to perform the essential functions in the job description in order for them to be deemed qualified, right? And yet, I think we sometimes forget that who writes the job descriptions? Well, the employers do. And every day of the week, employers all over America and all over the world rewrite their job descriptions for various reasons and retool in order to meet the demand of a current economy. So we'll dive into that a little bit further down the road, but the essential functions of the job do not need to be set in concrete. Beth?
Thanks, Pat. So when we think about, again, creating that welcoming environment, because that's really a part of your overall recruitment strategy as an organization. You spend a lot of time and a lot of money on creating cultures where you want to welcome people into your work, your organization. So expanding those strategies to include people with disabilities begins with really creating that welcome mat, right? How do you authentically include language, right, that suggests that people with disabilities are welcome here? They're welcome to apply. Well, one way to do that is to ensure that the application process is accessible, right? That your organization is not just putting words out there behind your job postings that say, hey, we're an equal opportunity employer, but you are truly doing the work behind that, which means that if your application process sits on your website, that website, in fact, is accessible to people like myself that use assistive technology, that use magnification software to apply for positions. So much of what we experience now, even in an interview, is a virtual environment. So if you're hosting intake processes or interview or onboarding processes with your organization, and you're using a platform like we're using today with Zoom, are you using those platforms that are accessible and paying attention to that? Again, listing any necessary physical requirements that your jobs require so that applicants can have a full understanding of what that work really does entail. And then finally, including workers that may perform these physical duties with or without accommodation. So ensuring that even again, if you have a standard onboarding process for all employees, that is a perfect opportunity for you to share your company's commitment to including disability inclusion, right? Do you have an accommodation process? Again, during that onboarding process, sharing the fact that if you need an accommodation, we want to ensure that you are able to maximize your success here. We want to be sure that you can efficiently perform your job, and here's the process to do that. Next slide. So some practical recruitment strategies, again, clearly stating that individuals, qualified individuals with disabilities are welcome to apply, yes, but ensuring also, as I said before, that your accommodations policy and process is made known. If you have a recruiting team, or if you have one recruiter that's out there sourcing talent, make sure that they know and understand what those policies are, so that as they engage with applicants, whether that's at a job fair, whether that is online, having chats with potential applicants, that they are very well equipped and confident when they engage in those conversations around accommodations at your organization. You want to post jobs on disability sourcing websites. An example would be the Disability in North Carolina. We host a jobs portal that can be found on our website. Again, companies use that because they know when they post jobs that those jobs are getting in front of a pool of candidates with disabilities. But there are a lot of other sources out there. North Carolina Department of Vocational Rehabilitation is obviously a very well-known source for talent. The career centers, your local career centers, we've spent a lot of time heightening their awareness and educating them, equipping them to better serve job seekers with disabilities in our community. And then finally, don't forget the community college systems, the secondary schools, colleges, universities, disability advocacy groups. These are all ways for you to tap into the talents of individuals with disabilities. Understanding this, take what strategies you have now. Any place that you are sourcing diverse talent today, you have the opportunity to expand that to reach individuals with disabilities within those diverse talent pools as well. So again, make it known that you are committed to this work, that you are looking for diverse talent that includes individuals with disabilities, and incorporate that in your existing recruitment strategy. Next slide.
Yeah, so as part of this employer virtual forum, we were charged with doing a survey of employers. And the interesting results from those surveys were that most employers do have policies around recruitment and their application process, et cetera. But 36% of the employers did identify that they would like help with developing specific recruiting strategies to reach out and find talent with disabilities. So I would charge you with, let's take a look at these job descriptions and revisit essential functions to identify and remove any bias or hidden barriers or things that just don't work anymore for today's world. And I'm going to challenge you to say, let's look for creative ways to modify or create job descriptions that actually leverage the talents of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and may in fact create greater efficiency and job satisfaction. So here's a little question for you, a little thought experiment. Does everybody who does a stocking job, let's say it's in a modern hospital today, stocking materials, do they all have to be able to read and write? Well, that's a trick question, because now if you've actually been in some of our most modern high-tech hospitals, most of the stocking is done pictorially, in other words, with pictures, not with words, not even with codes, because sometimes that can be really a slow and inefficient way to identify which item needs to go on which particular shelf. Likewise, in most cases, people are not taking a list and check marking off what they've done by hand. In many cases, the inventory is being collected electronically with laser guns and automatically appears on the inventory control apparatus. Similarly, I have been into modern picking production lines where you're picking items that are loaded onto trucks for food service or for delivery of other kinds of production items. And many of those are automated to the point you would actually not have to be able to read or write in order to be highly efficient doing that job. So the reason I'm saying this is let's think creatively about the way we work, not just today, but into the future, as efficiencies are created that make it possible to hire individuals who can be just as productive, maybe even more productive than more typical employees. And by the way, we all experienced this in the pandemic, right? So now we know the answer. Does everybody have to come to the office to do their work? Or can they be actually even more efficient working remotely in some instances? Food for thought. So now I'll turn it back to Barton.
Yeah. So let's talk about the elder conversation. So the bottom line is the disclosure conversation now begins and ends with that the more often interesting the work environment is, and the more often and transparent people's relationships are with their managers and supervisors, the easier this conversation will be. Why is that? So, a lot of people with disabilities often worry that if they are open about their needs, they will be discrimination or unfair treatment because for a long time this has been the reality. And while there are laws out there to protect against discrimination, not all employers or applicants might be aware of this. So, but at the same time, when 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 an employee is able to secure the benefits both parties, because the person may be eligible for other services that would help them perform even better. And of course, that impacts the whole company. But again, the disclosure permission is entirely built upon trust that has been established either before or during the conversation. So let's see what happens when when that trust isn't there.
My name is Benjalee Pittman, and I am a person with disabilities. In the past, I have had some privacy where I did not want to disclose any disabilities that I had. I'm currently a person with diagnosed with ADHD since I was a young woman, and also dyslexia. And I didn't find out dyslexia until college. And I was already in the middle of nursing school and went through nursing school with no problem with all my disabilities. Worked for my employer for almost a year and a half. They never knew I had a disability. I never disclosed it. They found out through a talk I did with a school that I did have a disability. I did have ADHD and I did have dyslexia. And instead of speaking to me about it, looking at my history, which was untouched, I never had any problems with my job, I was placed on a different shift. I was placed on night shift. And it took me almost a year and a half to get off a night shift. But instead of talking with me and just saying, you know, we found out you have this, talk to us a little bit about it. Is there anything that you need to know? I was moved to a different shift and kind of secluded from the processes and the duties that I had for over a year and a half. So I would still be working there today if I had that trust within that employer. If I had that I could talk to them, I could trust them, I could have open communication. And if they had any questions, I was always open to discuss them. And my past history of my work ethics would have shown that, but they saw the disability. They saw the label. And then I was placed in a position that they felt that I could handle, not what I had been doing. So trust is a big thing with employers, and open communication is another huge area that don't be afraid, don't be fearful to talk to that person. The person's lived with their disabilities their entire life, and they know what they can and cannot do. They know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, and that's going to better your company with having that communication, and also with the team members, their coworkers. It'll strengthen that bond that you have with the person with individual disabilities. My name is
Thanks. So thank you, Barton. So again, the employer interview questions, so important. And let me just say that, you know, that message that we just heard just really says it all. When you think about it, I'd still be there today, right? I'd still be working there today if, let that just kind of resonate with you as an employer listening to that. Because we are in a time where employers are just starving for good talent. And so understand the importance of what you're hearing today and how important it is to really open up conversations and create that trusted environment within your organization to foster these types of healthy conversations around a disability and disclosure. So let's talk about interview questions. This is always a big you know, piece of heightening awareness and increasing confidence when we engage with individuals with disabilities, particularly those with IDD, right, in an interviewing situation. So is it okay for an employer to ask a job applicant if they have an intellectual or developmental disability? The answer is no, but instead the employer can ask about job skills and the qualifications that an individual has and brings to a particular job. So the employer may ask, you know, how could you perform the essential functions of this job? How will you do that? You know, ask them to describe how they might do that. You also may have an opportunity to ask them to demonstrate how they might do that. Understanding, and you'll see right here on the screen, the no job sampling. That's a topic that we're going to hit on a little bit more next week when we talk in more depth about customized employment and some of the areas around accommodations for individuals, job coaching and that type thing. But understand that as an employer, there are opportunities for you to set up simulated experiences in order to demonstrate an individual's ability to perform the jobs. That said, it is a practice type of a setup, and it's something that you would have everyone in your organization do. And so understand as well that this job sampling really leans on the idea that as an employer, you're not getting free work, okay? You're not setting folks up to perform jobs, and you are benefiting from the outcomes of that work as an employer without paying that individual, okay? So I'm gonna leave it there and we'll pick that back up next week. If the applicant discloses that they have a disability, the employer may ask if the applicant requires a reasonable accommodation. Absolutely. If an individual discloses and or maybe they have a visible disability, and you again are asking specific questions about the performance of the functions of that position, it's okay to ask them, will they require any accommodations? And then don't forget to invite them to request that accommodation. It's not just enough to have a person say, I need an accommodation, but they also have to follow the process and engage in that interactive discussion to request an accommodation as well. Next slide. And so in effective interviewing strategies, again, there are questions that you can ask that are not in violation of the ADA. And in some instances, the disability, obviously, as we talked about, is very apparent. But I think the most important thing for you to take away as well when you think about developing these strategies is that statistics tell us that 74%, and in some cases even 75% of persons with disabilities have hidden disabilities. So you may or may not even know that the person that you're interviewing or the applicant has a disability. And so it is very important when you're interviewing to have the conversation again about the work environment, and understand that your company again supports disability inclusion, supports accommodating individuals with disabilities, and invite them to engage in that interactive process to get the accommodations they need in order to perform the jobs that you have for them. Focus again your discussion on their needs and the job, right? What is it that they're going to be doing in your organization? And as Pat had mentioned, a lot of that focuses on the job descriptions that you have. So paying attention to those as well. But it's always okay to ask an individual about how they will perform the job. Next slide.
Yeah. So we can't overemphasize enough that last point about how you the lesson remain focused on the job. You so so again performance. So I see what performance of job duties either with or without accommodation is perfectly acceptable. And again, if the person has the obvious disability, such as myself, it's perfectly in your right to ask how they would perform this duty, and what you will find most often is that people with disabilities have and often come with their own innovative solutions to solve these performance challenges that you may have never thought of. So, this thank you.
Thanks, Barton. So let's talk. Let's have some discussion about kind of what we've learned. This is where we really do want to take some time and hear from you. We'd love for you to engage in some conversation. I know that some of you have been having some conversation in the chat box during today's presentation, but really want to encourage you to take a minute and some around the things that you've heard today. What are some strategies that you've learned that maybe you could take away from today's conversation? You know, how can what you've learned today really help you to create a more welcoming environment for self-disclosure in your own organizations?
Yeah, so Beth, we do have a comment in the chat box around an individual has a friend who suspects they may have autism. However, they've never been diagnosed, but they have lost jobs because of situations that might point to difficulty with making eye contact or direct communication, things that would be on the neurodiversity spectrum. And one of the respondents wrote back and said to suggest that individual go to vocational rehabilitation to see if they could get a diagnosis, because having that in hand might be helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, I guess, that's one thing, right, through this process, because there is a process. Employers have a process where they engage in that interactive conversation, but part of that is to provide that support and demonstrating that in fact an individual has a disability. And some might say, well, can't you take the employee's word for it? That would, let me explain too, that a lot of times that doctors and the medical documentation to support the conditions often come with some recommendations on ways to accommodate as well. I know that's always an opportunity for the medical provider or the support person to provide some input and insight as well into what would best support the needs of that employee, along obviously with the employee themselves in giving that information. But that was a great comment. Pat, I don't know if you have any other, or Barton, if you have any other thoughts on that.
So Beth, what's in my consciousness is I'm wondering if people have any things they'd like to share about how their workforce, their job description has changed after the pandemic, and things that they thought were not possible are now more routine than ever. Because I think it's in that intersection of how we have to get creative to adjust to the world of the future, where people with disabilities are going to find their sweet spot. So does anybody have anything they like to share about your pandemic experiences or things you had to learn to do differently? I know for me, it was mastering Zoom, which I have not done, but continue to work at.
And Pat, I don't know if everybody's on mute or if they've been placed off mute, or we have.
Yeah, well, yeah, I did that. Now I can open it up.
Okay.
Problem being that can sometimes backfire on us. So
Right, so people can unmute themselves. So if you're
yes,
trying to give us a question, you just need to unmute yourself to
yeah,
engage.
if you want to have a verbal question to one of us, and feel free to reach out to Barton or myself as well.
Hello, my name is Denise Banks. I'm from the DVRS in Elizabeth City. I know for me, one thing I've had to learn is how to look up work from home jobs. So I had to figure out how to see which ones were real and which ones were kind of a scam, because I've had a lot of clients that are more interested in work from home jobs now since COVID hit.
Boy, that is such a great point.
Yes, it was hard.
No, it's great, because there are scam situations out there, and we have to be careful about that.
Yes, I never realized how many there were, especially on Indeed. The work from home ones, a lot of them aren't real.
Well, I'm gonna put a plug out for our Ability Jobs portal, because the jobs on our Ability Jobs portal are real. They're not scams, and these are companies that have they're using this portal because it's a sole source for finding people with disabilities. And by the way, as a DVR counselor, your individuals that you support that are on your caseload can put their profiles on that at zero cost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No cost to them to advertise, and then they tap into these big companies. Beth, do you want to amplify that?
Yeah, I will just say, I was just on the phone yesterday with someone, actually not in Elizabeth City, but kind of on that coastal area of our state. And it is difficult, right? Because the jobs in some of those particular areas can be limited. And so to be able to build a profile that can be seen by a lot of different companies across our state opens that individual up for a lot more opportunities. But similarly, she was looking for a position that was allowing her to have more flexibility to work remotely. And you think about, a lot of times the challenge of recruit or your drive into the office, we think about, oh, Charlotte traffic, 77, Raleigh, Triad area. But no, she still had an hour and 15-minute drive into her office. It just happened to be in a remote, rural kind of location. So we need to think about that. And it's true that the pandemic really did allow for businesses to step back and go, is it really that important for people to be face-to-face in an office? And so it has really expanded the thinking for flexibility in that way.
Here's a great question.
Great.
Beth, please share how you find out what jobs are real. I struggle with this. Yeah. So first of all, legit sites and specialized sites like our Ability Jobs portal. And second, there's nothing like doing your homework and your research.
Yep.
Yeah, Barton, you want to take over here?
Yeah. I've had a number of issues with this in the past, and the process that I found with well for me was I would read the person that I would research the business via a different source. So that might be their website, etc. And then what I did was I would find the posting on their site. That way, instead of via LinkedIn or some other third-party service.
I can't agree with you more, Barton. And I would say this, one of the common mistakes I see on the side of job seekers, I realize these webinars are written from the standpoint of the employer, right? But if you look at job seekers, one common problem is job seekers don't treat it as a two-way street as much as they should. As a job seeker, you should be researching the companies that you're interested in and learning as much as you can about them before you step into the waters of making applications. And they will show you who they are. That will be on their websites. It'll be when you go visit their storefronts if they happen to have an external face. And employers know this and are becoming aware that they need to be able to present a welcoming environment for all job seekers. And then in the chat, there's a comment that one individual was successful with a remote job until the pandemic ended. And then after it ended, everybody was called to go back in face to face. And so she lost her position. So those things can happen. But I think the employers in the know are finding out that the productivity of working from home has much to be desired, and that many of them have gone to either a hybrid situation or have totally allowed certain parts of their workforce to be completely remote. So we are coming up on 3 minutes, and I want to make sure we get everybody's comments or chats. Someone's asking for the URL of job portal. That would be dinc.org. We can help you offline with that. Someone else was talking. I'm sorry.
I just had a quick comment, and maybe this will be covered in future webinars. Feel free to tell me so. But one of my concerns is that, okay, we put all this effort into the recruitment and interviewing process and making sure that people feel welcome in that phase. But then once they get into the position, it's the long term, like making sure that
Yes.
they are successful in the long term. So I want to make sure, and I don't know if they should be happening simultaneously, or if we really need to start with in-house, internal processes, and thinking about how we can make sure that managers know how to conduct these interviews properly, that coworkers know how to welcome and make people feel part of the team, no matter what their background is. Or if we work on the recruitment process first, or, is it a chicken or the egg kind of thing, or is it a simultaneous thing? How do you go about that?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes. So what you hit it, right? You're absolutely right. It can't just be about getting them in the front door and not doing any of the work internally, culturally. Or they will walk in and they'll last about a month or two, like in the video we saw, right? And they'll head out the back door, right? That's not cost effective for anyone. So to your point, it needs to be a holistic approach, right? It needs to be about the recruitment strategy, absolutely. But just like with any organization, you can't just be about recruiting the talent. You have to be about creating an experience for them while they're there, right? So the same level of attention and detail and investment that goes into creating a culture for everybody in your organization needs to include people with disabilities. That's all, right? So training on, best practices, and yes, disability inclusion awareness and etiquette, absolutely. But my guess is that you're probably doing some diversity training as a whole. That needs to include and embed in that the conversation around disabilities as well. Understanding too, that don't rule out the fact, and I don't know how many employees you have in your company, statistics speak for themselves, right? You've got individuals with disabilities that are already working in your organization. So just like item number 4 says, right, on this discussion panel, don't forget to leverage the existing employees that you have with disabilities and or that are allies of people with disabilities, and include them in that conversation as well. Help, and gain some insights and innovative ideas from existing employees with disabilities on how to source, right, and create cultural transformation within your organization that helps everybody.
Your question was also a great tee up for our 2 remaining webinars.
That's right. And so our next webinar series will focus specifically on that idea of creating those disability inclusion and employer topics around customized integrated employment, and a comprehensive overview of what that looks like in a work environment. And that's where we will take some deeper dive into the idea of a job coach as an accommodation as well. And so join us next week, August 24th. And then there are additional opportunities on August 31st, where we'll talk about providing reasonable accommodations, and again, do a deeper dive into that topic. So the Zoom link you used for today's meeting will be the one you will use next week, next Wednesday, as well as the following Wednesday, as we wrap up our employer training series. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we thank you for your questions and your comments. If you have colleagues that have not registered, please encourage them to do that as well. And we'd love to see you back next week. And with that, thank you again, Barton. Thank you. Great job. Pat, thank you as well for the work that you guys are doing. And thanks to those of you that join us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.